It's time to talk about Andy Burnham. There is something genuinely fascinating happening in British politics right now, and I've got opinions. So let's get into it. A few days ago, Burnham walked into a by-election in a place called Makerfield and absolutely demolished it. Honestly, the man didn't just win, he strolled in like he owned the place. Now, if you know anything about how the Labour Party actually works, you know why that's such a big deal. No sitting Labour Prime Minister has ever faced a real internal challenge for his job while still in Downing Street. That's never happened. Not once. Keir Starmer won the 2024 election with one of the biggest majorities in modern British history, 172 seats. I mean, that's the kind of win you'd frame and put on your wall. This is not a prime minister you'd expect to be in trouble 2 years later. And yet, here we are with a poll showing 25% of Britain wants Burnham as the next prime minister, compared to just 12% who want Starmer to stay. 12%. That's not a popularity contest anymore. That's barely a participation badge. But I want to be upfront about something. Before we get too deep into this, we've been here before in Britain. Plenty of Labour figures have postured as the next big thing, made all the right noises, and then quietly vanished without ever actually taking the crown. Britain loves hyping up a political main character who never shows up for the finale. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you Burnham is definitely becoming Prime Minister, because British political history says otherwise. What I will tell you is that this particular standoff between these two particular men is one of the most genuinely fascinating leadership stories Labour has produced in years. In today's video, we're breaking down everything you need to know. Who Andy Burnham actually is, why Keir Starmer has somehow made himself this disliked in under 2 years. And trust me, that takes real effort. Why this fight is happening right now, and what it would actually mean for Britain if Burnham pulled this off. Let's talk about Andy Burnham first. Here's the funny part about him. The man went to Cambridge. He spent years as a proper Westminster insider before anyone in Manchester even knew his name, and now, somehow, he's spent the last decade convincing the entire country he's the scrappy northern guy who's never been near London elites. It's a full personality transplant, and honestly, I respect the commitment. He's been mayor of Greater Manchester since 2017. Underneath the image, the man has real receipts. He brought Manchester's buses back under public control through the B network. Which sounds boring until you realize it's the kind of thing that quietly runs people's daily lives. He's overseen real regeneration in the city. He stood up to the government during COVID when he felt the North was getting shafted. Honestly, I think these are the kind of wins most politicians only pretend to have, and the numbers back him up in a big way. He's basically the only politician in Britain with a positive approval rating right now, and he just pulled 66% of the vote in his own backyard. That's not popularity. That's practically a fan club. My one honest pushback, and I think this matters, we still don't really know his national plan. Manchester loves him. The rest of Britain is just hoping there's more behind the curtain than vibes. Which brings us to the man he's actually coming for. There's a small chance you don't recognize the name Keir Starmer. But let me jog your memory anyway. This is the same guy who made sure your grandma's winter heating money got cut. This is the same guy who told the country, with a straight face, that his government was going to have to be unpopular. As if that's a campaign slogan and not a confession. He won a massive landslide back in July 2024. 2 years later, he's sitting at one of the worst approval ratings any British Prime Minister has had in recent memory, around -34. I genuinely believe that's one of the fastest falls from grace this country has seen, and it didn't happen by accident. Let me walk you through why. He cut winter fuel payments for pensioners, which is about the worst look a Labour government can possibly manage. He triggered a massive backbench rebellion over welfare cuts, with his own MPs turning on him. His government got tangled in the Mandelson-Epstein scandal, forcing an apology nobody in Downing Street wanted to give, and tax rises landed right on top of a public that was already exhausted by the cost of living. Any one of these on its own, survivable. All of them stacked together in under 2 years. That's not bad luck, that's a pattern. And honestly, I think his real problem is just him as a person. Burnham feels like the guy who'd remember your name at the pub. Starmer feels like the guy who'd email you about it instead. That contrast, more than any policy, is exactly why one of these men is currently winning by-elections, and the other one is bleeding support from his own party. Now let's talk about what actually happened in Makerfield, because the mechanics here are genuinely wild if you slow down and look at them. Burnham wasn't even a member of Parliament. He couldn't just announce he was challenging Starmer and show up at Downing Street. He needed an actual seat to open up first, which meant the whole plan only worked because a sitting Labour MP happened to step aside. Before it even happened, people were calling this a potential circus, because imagine the optics of a mayor parachuting into a random seat purely to set up a leadership bid. Risky. Could have blown up in his face. It didn't. He crushed Reform UK's candidate decisively, and here's the part I find genuinely fascinating. Green voters, Lib Dem voters, even some Conservative voters all seem to tactically pile in behind him just to stop Reform from winning. That's not normal voter behavior. That's a coalition of people who don't even like each other agreeing on one thing: keep Farage's party out at any cost. And the aftermath moved fast. Within 48 hours, roughly 100 Labour MPs were publicly calling for Starmer to go. Ministers started resigning in protest. Burnham's camp was already on the phones lining up support. I think that speed tells you everything. This wasn't a slow boil. This was a dam breaking. Now, here's where I want to pump the brakes a little, because skepticism is healthy, and I'd be lying if I pretended otherwise. This is Burnham's third attempt at Labour leadership. He already lost once to Corbyn back in 2015. He's been making noise about challenging Starmer through interviews for over a year before this by-election even happened. So forgive me if I don't treat this like it's automatically happening just because round 3 started strong. And winning a by-election doesn't hand you the keys to Downing Street either. He genuinely needs the Parliamentary Labour Party to endorse him, or he risks looking like he just let himself in through the side door uninvited. There are real structural headaches too. Can he even hold both jobs at once, mayor and MP? There's shaky precedent for that. Boris Johnson and Dan Jarvis both tried briefly, and it wasn't pretty. And honestly, Starmer doesn't see himself as some lame duck waiting to be replaced. He won the actual general election. In his mind, he earned this 5-year term, and Burnham didn't. Which brings us to the pushback. Because Starmer isn't just sitting there accepting his fate. He's publicly said he'll fight any challenge, and from what's being reported, he genuinely believes Burnham would be a worse prime minister, even if he admits Burnham's better on camera. Downing Street's whole strategy right now is to paint Burnham as a fiscal risk, basically a Liz Truss tribute act who'd spook the bond markets the second he touched the economy. And there's a wild card nobody's talking about enough. Wes Streeting might want his own shot at this too, which means what looked like a clean Burnham coronation could turn into a messy, multi-candidate scramble. And here's my honest opinion on the optics. Labour spent years mocking the Conservatives for chaotic leader swapping, Boris to Truss to Sunak, and if they pull the exact same move on themselves now, that's not a leadership change, that's a gift-wrapped present for their opponents. So let's say Burnham actually pulls this off. What would even change? Honestly, not as much as people think. Labour is being squeezed from both sides, losing working-class voters to Reform on the right and progressive voters to the Greens on the left. Burnham can't out-charisma his way out of that math. And while Labour fights itself over who gets to be captain, Reform UK is just sitting back, quietly climbing the polls. Honestly, I think that's the one outcome everybody in this story, Burnham included, should actually be terrified of. So let's zoom out, because this isn't really just a Burnham story. British prime ministers used to last over 5 years on average. Thatcher did 11, Blair did 10. Now we're looking at roughly 7 prime ministers in 10 years. That's not one weird news cycle. That's a symptom of something much bigger breaking down. Brexit split the country and never really healed. Living standards have been stuck since 2008. Immigration anxiety hasn't gone anywhere, and there's this background hum in British